The Sith rely on their passion for their strength. They think inwards, only about themselves.
Interesting.
No mercy for you.
Hello and welcome to HD Philosophy, the channel where we take some time with the classics to bring our lives into high definition, and this is episode 1 of Darth Vader in Street Fighter 6, the Philosophy series. In today's video, we will examine why Darth Vader chose evil and the Jedi versus the Sith, using Plato's Gorgias. Enjoy. So one thing I want to focus on today is how Anakin described the difference between the Sith and the Jedi. Anakin says that the Jedi are selfless, they only think about others, while the Sith are very selfish, they only think about themselves. Now, a lot of people might hear this and just kind of brush it off, but this fundamental first principle is extremely important, especially when you consider the individual's intentions. I mean, really, can you ever care about somebody else when all of your intentions are only focused inward? I mean, this is what Augustine would call incurvatus in se, a Latin phrase that means kind of pulled or curved inwards. In bioethics, we talk about the foundations of nursing ethics, all relying on the virtue of what is best for the patient. Like, the nurse can't actually do their job if they are curved inside, if all of their intention is selfish, because the foundation of medicine is thinking about others. And in the Gorgias, Socrates is really arguing against the difference between the rhetoricians and people like him, doctors of the soul. See, those who want to just focus on rhetoric, their intention is to win the argument. But Socrates, what separates him from all the other sophists of the time is that he was actually searching for wisdom. So his was more of a selfless thing. He was out there in the world trying to figure something out, especially since his great Athens lost to Sparta. So those like the rhetoricians that are only trying to persuade are not doing anything good. And in order to clarify this distinction, he talks about the difference between a cook and a doctor. So the cook's job is to produce things that taste good. The doctor's intentions, on the other hand, is what is good for the patient, to bring the patient back into a state of health. Now, analyzing these two, since the cook's job, their telos, is to produce a good dish, if a poison was the best tasting thing, you could see how the cook might try to incorporate that poison. I'm thinking about blowfish, for example, you know? There's that walking the line that if it isn't prepared correctly, it could kill the individual. But the chef, their job is to produce a good taste, regardless of what is good for their patrons. Now, I'll offer an olive branch here because I can see a lot of chefs getting angry. Obviously, you want your patrons to keep coming back, right? But from a Kantian point of intention, that wouldn't be the goodwill, because the reason why you're not poisoning them is because you want them to come back. You're not doing it because poisoning your patrons would be a bad thing, you know? For the doctor, however, they prescribe medicine that brings their patient back into a state of health, even if it hurts, even if it's bitter. And Socrates uses this analogy to differentiate the difference between a rhetorician and a doctor of the soul. The rhetorician just wants to win the argument, even if he's producing falsities. All he wants to do is win the public over. And he goes even deeper into the fact of the rhetorician actually uses the ignorance of the masses in order to pull them in, because the rhetorician doesn't actually have the expert knowledge, because they wouldn't bring an expert in with the tactics that they're using. So they actually rely on the ignorance of their audience in order to persuade. The doctor, however, their whole intention is what is good for the patient. So they may have to hurt the patient, as in order to align their shoulder, they have to pop it back in, and that's gonna hurt. But it's momentary pain for good results down the road. I hope you see kind of where I'm going here. The cook imitates medicine, the good in the medicine, but it's simply aimed at pleasure. just like the rhetorician imitates justice just to persuade. The doctor, however, cares for the body even if it hurts the patient, even if they don't like the medicine. It's what is good for the patient. Just like Socrates cares for the soul even if it hurts. He's going to say these things that hurt them because ignorance, when shattered, often produces a kind of pain. This reminds me of Proverbs 27:6. Faithful are the wounds of the friend, but the kisses of the enemy are deceitful. And this kind of gets in line to the Jedi versus the Sith. It's almost like the Sith will whisper those sweet nothings. They'll tell Anakin, in this sense, everything he wants to hear. You are capable of saving everyone. You can become all-powerful. I'm going to feed into that ego right there. The Jedi, however, are going to say you're not all-powerful. You have limitations, and you have to be able to accept where your limitations exist. Yes, push through it. Yes, work hard. We're going to point out the flaws in a way of bitter medicine to make you a better individual, but we're also going to point out the areas that require a realistic view of reality, because reality always wins at the end of the day, right? But this sweetness of the Sith is very much linked to the tyrant versus the man of reason in the Gorgias as well. Every fight reveals a question. So this is a drive impact, and I noticed this person kept doing it, but I couldn't react to it. They would also jump in all the time, and I noticed I was losing because of that. So I started training to react to drive rush, drive impact, and jump. And I did this for hours until I could react, check, and anti-air. So let's see if it helped as we continue our discussion on the sweetness of the Sith as expressed within the Gorgias. So Callicles, he actually argues that the strong should dominate the weak. Remind you of anybody? So in this sense, power is actually an aim to secure freedom. If you aren't strong enough, somebody will dominate you. They'll take away your freedom. So you better work on becoming the strongest individual you can be in order to remain free, because there's always a bigger fish, right? But what Callicles is saying here is the best life is one of unrestrained desires, maximizing pleasure, taking whatever you can because you earned it, and that is what is given to those who are at the top of the food chain. Self-control, therefore, is actually a weakness imposed by society, something Glaucon will get into in the Republic. For those who are interested in that, see my video on The Departed. So controlling your desires makes you weak, and if you're weak, you'll be dominated by someone else. So maximize your pleasure. Don't buy this false sell of goods by society that you should contain yourself, that you should have some modicum of self-control. Now Socrates, he's like, here's the issue. Pleasure can't be a good because desires are endless and they're never satisfied. It requires consistent replenishment. This is something also highlighted in the Platonic dialogue, the Phaedrus, where Socrates said, you are only in control when your rational agent is like a charioteer to the two horses of like spirit and the appetite. You are truly a master of yourself when rationality is in control, and that's the problem with pure self-seeking and hedonistic behavior. Soren Kierkegaard, in his masterpiece Either Or, he talked about the aesthetic life, and it very much runs parallel to what's being discussed here. For Soren Kierkegaard, there are three different types of life, and I'm not going to go into the others. I'm just going to focus on the aesthetic life because that's very much the tyrannical or Sith-like life in there. What you do is the aesthetic life is just one of pure enjoyment, pure maximizing of pleasure, unrestrained desires, getting what you want all the time. Evil then becomes boredom. Boredom is the root of all evil in this kind of life, because what you want is nuance. That's how you replenish the pleasure, right? So as soon as you go down this rabbit hole, even your own existence and the way you view life would need to change. So you become almost like Legion, a bunch of different individuals. But Socrates really focuses on how seeking pleasure and seeking power is like trying to fill a jar full of holes, needs constant replenishing. And he chooses this imagery with a specific intention because the rational person is the one that understands when their jar is full. Moderation becomes understanding when they've had too much. That way, they don't become a slave to their desires. Here's the thing, and this is something I also learned in Street Fighter. You can have a lot of strength, you can have a lot of skill, but if you are easily manipulated by someone else because you get angered too soon, well then that is an avenue for your opponent to exploit. So it is very important to be strong. I mean, I have a family. I need to be strong, and I have defended them. But what is the point of strength if you're easily manipulated? And that manipulation comes from this pleasure-seeking behavior that subjugates your soul and adds further avenues of exploitation that can be used to take everything away from you. See, pleasure is not a good. A life driven by unchecked appetites is actually miserable, not powerful. And that's the lie. So in this way, society is actually like a buffer, letting you know, no, you've gone too far. This is enough. And in that way, it allows your rational faculty to hone in that desire so that you can continue to act in a rational way, because it is rationality that allows you to act freely. Those two are intimately linked. But the tyrant, even though they might seem the most free to a casual onlooker, they are the ones with the most insatiable appetites and thus are internally disordered, always seeking the new fix, always seeking the nuance. Their intention is to a hedonistic life of self-pleasure. The only thing they care about is themselves. Incurvatus in se, from Augustine, right? That curve inwards. You can't live a selfless life if all you're thinking about is yourself. So Anakin Skywalker is very much taken by this kind of Sith philosophy. I mean, he's the most powerful Jedi, right? And he wants more. He wants more, but he knows he shouldn't. That is the insatiable desire and the promise of the tyrants and the promise of those who actually don't care about you. To love someone is to will the good in the other. And this is hardly a good when you become a slave or an addict to those desires. See, your friends, like the Jedi were, are like doctors in that they will the good within you. That's that love from Augustine. So they're going to say the things that you don't want to hear because they want you to be the best individual you can be. Now, I will admit there are some times that people pretend to be friends and they'll rationalize that really what they're doing this for is for your own best interest, but really they wanted the success, they wanted the win, and so they rationalize it in that way. That's where wisdom comes in, and being able to understand who your friends are and those who are not your friends or acquaintances. But your enemies, like the cooks, will offer you things that taste good under the illusion of medicine. That is, under the illusion of it's what's good for you. But they're not. They know they're feeding you like a dealer feeds his addicts. They're giving you something that they know is insatiable. They're telling you the things that you want to hear because you might be surrounded by a bunch of great friends who want the best for you, but you just don't have the wisdom to see it. And that was Anakin Skywalker's fatal flaw that turned him into Darth Vader. Because Anakin Skywalker wanted and desired something that was insatiable, and that's power. He was the most powerful Jedi, but he became an idol to himself, thinking he could become all-powerful until he became subjugated to it. And now, Darth Vader, as a warning and a symbol of this, is forever locked in a prison of his own making. But something I realized as I was playing this match right here on screen is that I will definitely lose when I start to panic on defense and I start mashing the jab button. That is what was getting me killed. But like the snake in the garden in Genesis, your biggest flaws hide in your greatest blind spots. If you discover the snake, then that is more than half the battle. Because now you have identified a weakness or an area that needs to be fixed. We all have them. None of us are perfect. None of us are all powerful. But the message of hope lies in this. If we cannot see in the areas that we are most blind, which is everyone, then we need to make sure we surround ourselves with people who have the courage to point out those weaknesses. So next time you hear somebody criticize you, ask the question that Anakin Skywalker did not. Is this a possible snake in the garden? Because if you don't and you push those kinds of people outside of your life, all you will be surrounded by are the Sith Lords that whisper honey into your ear, but subjugate you to their will. The warning of Darth Vader.
Thank you for watching HD Philosophy. Like, share, and subscribe.